LABUBUs. Whether you think they're sweet and cute, maybe a little evil, perfectly innocent and adorable, or possibly demonic and wanting to take over the world, there's no doubt that they've captured many hearts. Today I'm going to try my hand at sculpting a custom LABUBU, so with that being said, hello everybody! Start with the aluminum foil base, and as these guys are a little thick with 2 C's, add a few layers and pack it in tight. Now add in some liquid Sculpey to help the clay stick to the foil. I'm going to be using some Sculpey Primo. I just squeeze some out and use the nozzle to smear it around. Coming in with a conditioned and flat sheet of clay, I use a clay roller to get the job done. Depending on brand or how old the clay may be, it may take a bit to get it in workable condition, but it's way easier than just doing it by hand. And it's also nice to get flat, even sheets. Now taking that rolled out clay, pressing it onto the base, add more clay if you need to, and smooth it out. Which ends us up with an oddly shaped egg. Bringing out the foil again, we're going to be starting on the limbs. Just a tightly packed ball for the thigh, add the adhesive, then the clay. And if you have any issues with the foil not sticking, just add a bit of clay under where it lifts and smooth it down. And a quick side note, any supplies that you may need for this tutorial, I'll be listing affiliate links in the description box below. And next, just repeat that same process that we did for the legs for the arms. And during this recording, you'll be seeing a couple of band-aids throughout the process because I unfortunately started having an eczema flare-up. So I better not see no mean comments, okay? Because I can't think I can handle it. Oh, and this snail decided to break off, but don't worry, it'll grow back considering how long it took me to film this sculpting process, so enjoy your vacation, okay? You'll be back. And with the limbs done, on to the next step. On the main body, I'm going to be using my thumb to make imprints on where I'm going to be attaching them. Using my handy dandy needle tool, I'm going to be scoring the body and the limb pieces, and then using a little bit of adhesive and pressing them together. For a little extra bond strength, smooth the pieces together and then finish out shaping it by adding more clay. I had to make sure that the arms were a bit thinner than the legs, as them thighs be thick though. You're pretty much going to be ending up with something that looks a bit like a rotisserie chicken. Adding that last arm wing flap, shaping it out, and you see what I mean? It's a rotisserie chicken. Next, for the more fragile parts, I'm going to be bringing in the cosplay. Breaking off a small rounded piece, I'm going to be using this for the hands. To sculpt out the little finger details, I'll be using a more flat-headed tool. Pushing the clay to the side to space them out a little bit more, rounding off the tops, and then adding a teeny tiny little thumb. A bit more difficult to attach to the hand, but it works. Gave it a little bit more of a palm, and then curved it over my finger. Look at this adorable mini hand, and now there's 2. Bringing in some floral wire, and cutting off 2 pieces that are about 1 inch long. Sticking them into the hands, and now you got yourself 2 SpongeBob glove balloons. Grabbing some more cosplay, we're going to be starting on the feet. Kind of making like an irregular oval shape, I guess. I'm going to be tracing out where to cut out the toes. And using this nifty blade, I'm going to be cutting out the extra. A nice satisfying removal, and then taking off a bit more to where I'm going to be attaching it to the leg. And 1 little foot, and 2 little feet. Now repeat that same step that we did for the hands, adding more wire, and now you have 2 little feet balloons. That wasn't a thing in SpongeBob. I don't think. And for some extra detail, carving out the indent on the foot. This is where the Pop Mart logo usually is, although the lettering is a little bit small for me, so I'm not going to be adding that. I'm not a professional, okay? On to the next step, using a ceramic tile, parchment paper, adding the feet and hands. We're going to be baking it at 275 for 25 minutes. And once that's done, pre-poke some holes into the limbs for the wire to go through more easily, and add the hands and the feet. And with those being added, it's looking a little less chickeny now. Next, now moving on to their big ol' head, we're going to repeat some of the steps prior. Grab a fairly large ball of aluminum foil that's tightly packed with adhesive and wrap it with clay. If the clay is still feeling a bit crumbly, just use a small amount of clay softener, just a tiny amount at a time, and work it through. Eventually, I got it to the right consistency. It was still a little lumpy bumpy though, so I added a bit more softener and I smoothed it out. Not 100% perfect, but it's good for now. Next, adding the head to the body, add some scratch marks, adhesive, and bring it on in. To make sure that it has a strong bond, I pressed it down firmly and added more clay to attach. They don't really have a neck, so this was an easy part. And once that's all smoothed out, I added more to the head. It was at this point that I felt a little concerned that I may have underestimated how large their head was and was worried if I added enough aluminum foil to the base, but it worked out in the end. Did a little more smoothing and then started adding the details of the fur around the face. Using one of the longer ends of one of my needle tools, I just traced around to see where I'd be placing the fur. While it wasn't perfect at first, it did offer a guideline, so it did help to make the process easier. And after adding that final piece, it made me think of something. This looks like an astronaut LABUBU.
LABUBU, we have a problem.
Moving right along, I'm going to be using this tool to detail out the face. At first, I started using the more pointed end of the tool first to begin detailing out the eyebrows, but ended up using the other side. It was less harsh, and for me, it was easier to help curve the clay. It's a bit difficult to explain, but for the facial features, I would trace out the lines and do some slight carving. The eyes were a bit more tricky for me to do because I'm not the best at doing like circular shapes, but it came out alright. And after those alright eyes were done, I started to trace out where the nose would be. Pretty cute, but the head does need to be more wide. So I'm just gonna rip it up and fix it in a second, because my brain decided to fixate on creating the smile line first and then filling in the gaps. Just a message to myself, I guess, to smile through the disaster. Don't worry, it can be fixed. And it's actually pretty satisfying to do. Got a wider shaped head now, and it's almost like it never happened. Even though it did, just pretend you didn't see it. Just a smidge of volume needed in between the eyes, and now we looking like Squidward up in here. But jokes aside, that really needs to be fixed. And then shaping out the nose again. So basically, now that the whole face has been sculpted out, it's just adding more volume to the areas such as the lip and the eyebrows. The eyebrows don't stick out too much, so I flattened out small pieces of clay and smoothed them on. This was one of my favorite parts to do because it was exciting for me to start seeing the face almost fully formed. But now we'll be moving on to one of the more tedious parts. Using the silicone tool, I'm going to be tracing out where the teeth are going to be. This assures that I have all 9 and that they're spaced evenly. Sometimes it's just easier for me to see before I do. Once that looks good, I'm going to bring in another flat sheet of clay and trim off one of the edges. This will give me a completely clean side to work on and start sketching out the teeth. And once I have a size that I'm happy with, I'm going to carefully take a blade, cut it out, and scoop it up. Although given how tiny it is, it's a wee bit difficult to grab it. Since the teeth are so small, I'm going to be using tools to help place it on the mouth. Placing it was a bit tricky, but I just applied some gentle pressure, and then to fully attach it, I smoothed the top of the teeth into underneath the lip. And after seeing the full smile, just one more swipe to make sure they're all fully secured. With that now looking good, let's take care of the dust and dirt that rudely attached itself while we were working with it using some isopropyl alcohol and a paper towel. Just dab a small amount and start swiping away. It may take a little bit of elbow grease, but it does work really well and it's worth it in my opinion. Not too much effort later, and now we have a nice and clean, shiny dome. Pulling out the cosplay again, we're going to start working on the ears. Going to use a tool to carve out the inner side of the ear, and also the outer side. And like we did with the hands and the feet, we're going to be adding some more floral wire for extra stability. And once that's all set, pre-poke the holes on the top of the head and pop them right in. And fully attach by smoothing it in. After touching up the ears a bit, let's make an adorable detail of adding a whittle booty. Maybe a Labumbum, if you will. And even though I tried to make it look more round using the clay that was already on there, it still ended up looking like a Hank Hill pancake butt. Not to worry though, as it's a super simple, easy fix. Like the solution to most of my sculpting problems, just add more clay. Finishing off this LABUBU, I'm going to be smoothing it out with some rubbing alcohol. And although it still looks kinda flat at this angle, I promise you, it's not. So while I was working on this, I felt like the hands and feet weren't as secure as I would like them to be, so I decided to remove each one, add a dollop of adhesive, and then pop them back in. Now getting to the more fun parts of the process, I'm going to be starting on my own customization. Taking a mini ball of clay, rolling it into a cone shape, and curving it just a tiny bit. I'll give you a second to guess what I'm making. It's a mini mustache! Look at this dapper finger, it just needs a monocle. With some help of a silicone tipped tool, gently place the moustache on the face. And then using that same tool, I'm going to gently and carefully detail in some hairs. I'm loving how this is looking so far, and now that monocle is being passed from my finger to this guy. Simply exquisite. Now using a not used for teeth toothbrush, I'm just going to be adding some texture to the ears. It's a cool and simple technique that makes it look more like plushy fabric. Next, onto probably the most time-consuming part is sculpting out the fur. Using one of my metal needle tools, I just carve it out line by line, and if my hands are making it too warm and tend to smush things, I put it in the fridge for a little bit to cool. That way when it's cold, it's a little more difficult to ruin the detailing you already did. But once the fur is done, it's to the toaster oven! In a preheated oven set at 275 degrees for about an hour, this guy is looking pretty cozy in there. Feeling at home, bud? Sure. Now that he's all baked, I'm going to start using some white acrylic paint. It will take a few layers to get complete coverage for the gray areas, but I started off by painting the cause clay, and then I moved on for an all-over body paint, as the clay tends to darken a bit after baking. It takes a little more effort, but doing it this way you get a completely even base coat color. So now with this LABUBU looking kind of bare, let's customize him even further. I wanted to make one that kind of spoke more to me, so I decided I'm going to make an artist one. And given their chaotic nature, I thought it would be kind of cute to just do like massive paint blobs all over him. Like yes, while he is an exquisite artiste, he's also kind of messy, you know what I mean. And even though there's paint all over the place, it still landed beautifully on his fur. No, if that isn't art, then I don't know what is. His personality is just of a professional that knows it and he's gonna own it. So while it looks like it was a complete mess, it was on purpose. His fluffy fur was just a blank canvas. Every splatter, every drip of paint was strategically placed. Yes, even the ones that somehow ended up on his back and Labumbum. He's just super talented like that, okay? Stop judging. And just appreciate, because you're in the presence of greatness. I mean, just look at that paint butt freckle. And now with such a profession comes the necessary tools. Let's get started on making a giant paintbrush. Bringing out the floral wire again, I'm going to be using this as the handle of the brush. I'm going to be cutting this at a fairly long length because I want to try and create a dripping paint effect. So in order to do that, I made it long enough for the handle, and then right where the paintbrush head's going to be, I bent it down at an angle. Now I just need to roll out some cause clay that'll be the length of the handle. And when I'm happy with the size of that, the easiest way for me to insert the wire, I kind of just press it down into the clay and then fold it over. To me, this is just a way easier option than trying to slide a long piece of wire into a roll of clay without destroying the shape. This method isn't 100% perfect, but to clean up the shape, I just gently rolled it on my board. And to save progress, I baked this piece and I'm going to use sandpaper to shape it even further. Anytime you use sandpaper, make sure to always wear a face mask. Don't be breathing in any clay dust, okay? Good. And bringing in some brown folk art acrylic. Since this is already baked, I'm just gonna start painting it now. And to be honest, I was kind of just antsy to really start getting into this portion. Also enjoy this wonderful display of how bendy cosplay is after baking and how great it is for fragile pieces. Now I'm just going to add the metal part that connects the bristles to the handle. Smoothing them together, and then using my blade, I'm going to cut off any excess, creating a clean edge. I just love rewatching these parts. And once that's all cleaned up, I'm just going to use one of my needle tools and create some finer details. I just held my tool in one spot and rolled it around. With that being all set now, it's time to move on to making the bristles. I started off by making a teardrop shape, adding it to the wire, and at the tip giving it a slight curve, and readjusting the wire angle where I want the paint to be dripping. And once that was all set, I started detailing out the bristles. After doing that, I gave this another bake to save progress again. Now onto a more tricky but fun part is making the paint drip. First connecting it to the bristle head and then making a long drip down. I didn't want it being too thick, so I did thin it out just a bit. Giving it another bake yet again just so I don't destroy what I just did, I'm now adding a big ball of paint at the end of the drip. And mentioning the word tricky, I wanted to give this a splash effect. So I made a long and perfect flattened piece of clay and wrapped it around the base of the drip. Struggled to wrap it around, but eventually was able to close the gap, cut off the excess, and then smooth it over. And at the edges, I just curled them over and flopped them over a bit. Then adding a few ruffles, giving it a more flowy look. I just used the ends of one of my silicone rubber tools to help shape this part. Once I felt like there were enough ruffles, I pinched and pulled at the ends of them. Freshened up the shape and gave it another bake. Now with a sturdier base, I added more smaller drips for a splash effect. Considering I had no idea on how to go about this and pretty much just experimenting, I ended up pretty happy with how it was turning out. Now with the paintbrush almost done, let's work on the next accessory. Using one of the caps to one of my paint bottles, I'm going to be using it like a makeshift cookie cutter. It was the perfect size for what I needed it to be, so it worked out pretty well. Although it did leave some messy edges, so I'm going to be using my roller cutter to clean it up. Not a big deal though, and doesn't take very long to do. Bringing out another flat sheet of clay, I'm going to be using this bottle cap again to measure out the width that I need. And then using the blade, getting a nice straight cut. Just look at that removal. So good. Then using the blade to clean up the other edges. Can you guess what I'm making yet? If you haven't been able to yet, it's going to be a mini paint can. We just made the bottom, then the wall, and now we're just using a thumbtack to poke in where the handle's gonna be. Considering how many needle tools I have, I don't know why I use a specialty thumbtack, but I do. Super gently smoothing the edges, and then time for another bake. It's fine though, it feels like home to him. Bringing out that sandpaper again, I'm just gonna smooth out the edges, and then where it connected, it still looks a little uneven, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more clay to it. Bringing out a new fresh sheet of clay, I'm going to be cutting out a few long strips. This is going to be for some extra detailing on the top and bottom of the paint can. After adding some small amounts of adhesive, just press it on and wrap it around. To close the gap nicely, just cut off any excess and smooth it over. And simply enough, just repeat that step with the top of the can. And on the handle area, some adhesive, a small ball of clay, poke the hole through, and then bake again. And now we are finally getting into the painting. After baking that paintbrush again, the brown paint kind of seeped through the clay a little, but I just gave it a base gray paint and then I coated it with a metallic silver. And for the bristles and the paint drip, I'm just giving it a base white coat and letting it dry before doing the actual colors. And once it's finally dry, I'm going to start with the khaki color on the bristles. Even though shortly after that, since I still had the white paint open, I decided to pick up the paint can and give that a base coat as well. The actual can itself is pretty much just going to be white, but I'm going to also do the silver outlinings. Oh yeah, and also the bottom of the paint can too. Next up, I'm going to be doing some lettering, so taking this acrylic paint pen, I'm going to be drawing on the word paint. I really love this pen and it makes it so easy. And now we can finally get to all of the colors. There's just so many and it makes me so happy. Whoosh. Alright, now let's make our way back onto the paint can. Now I wanted this to match the same energy as the LABUBU, so I'm just gonna paint it like a mess. So I'm just gonna add some really thick drops of paint all around the can. Now this was a bit of a process because I just wanted to make this all purely acrylic. I mean, I could have sculpted on the drips again, but you know what? I don't got time for that. And to put it through another baking process, girl, please. If it wasn't for putting a counter in the edits, I probably would have forgotten the amount of times I pulled the oven out to bake something. And yes, sure, that's on me, but I'm also a klutz. I have to save my progress like every 5 steps. Or every 2 steps, you know? Leave me alone, I'm doing my best. And so for this step, I would pretty much do 1 layer, let that dry, a 2nd layer, let that dry, a 3rd layer, let that dry, and then for the drip, I would grab a huge glob on my paintbrush and pretty much just dab it on. I wanted this to be authentic, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, the dry time was a little bit longer, especially where the more thickened parts were, but it was fun experimenting it. As long as that end result is cute AF and chef's kiss, it was worth it. 10 out of 10. Next, we're going to be creating the handle for the paint can. This is going to be pretty simple. It's just bringing out more wire, cutting it to size, and bending it at the handles. Unfortunately, I don't know the exact size of this wire that I used. This was just an old spool that I had laying around in my room, but if I had to guess, maybe an 18 gauge. But now, let's hop back over to the paintbrush. Using a darker color, I'm just going to add some more detailing in between the bristles. And then for the drip, I didn't want to settle on just one color, so I'm going to do rainbow. Going by the Roy G bib, I'm just going to follow it all the way down. Also, to make it look nicer, I'm going to blend it in as I'm going along. It's easier this way as I can just keep adding colors one by one, adding another as the other is still wet, blending in and moving along. And it's just more fun when you have more colors to play with. Then for the bigger splatter areas on the body, I just went with my heart's desire and did what I want. If you like painting time lapses just as much as I do, then this one's for you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, so part of me might have felt like this looked like a giant booger, but you know what? I liked the way it looked still, so I kept it. and some gloss varnish, we're going to be adding this to the paint splatter to give it some shine. Covering all the ones on the body, the paintbrush, and the paint can. Now moving on to the middle of the ears, I'm going to start off by painting them red, orange, and yellow. And to match the booger on his head, give him a booger green nose. Then for the eyes, I wanted to go with some cotton candy colors. So the top of them, I'm just going to do a very light blue, then a super light pinky peach in the middle, and following the bottom with a darker pink and blending it all in. Now just adding some more light pink and finishing off with 2 small white shine spots to the eyes. And for that one random colored tooth, I went with purple. At first I went with lighter, but then I felt like a darker shade may be best. And for right now, just a very basic color for the mustache. Next up, we're doing the face, hands, and feet. I didn't have the exact color that I needed, so I'm just going to take some white and put in some light mocha color and just keep mixing until I get the right shade that I need. I did need to add white a few more times, but this was the color that I ended up with. I did have to keep in mind that once I paint it on, once it dries, it does darken just a tiny bit. But fortunately, I did end up with a shade that I was pretty happy with. And I don't know about you, but these parts are so satisfying for me to watch. Just look at them smooth paint glides. Sometimes it really is just the little things in life. And then the last foot was easy enough, just blank space. And coming back to the nose, giving it a two-toned look, I added some light green. Now going back to the mustache, I'm going to be using this darker brown to detail out the lining. Now this isn't going to be any regular old moustache. This is going to be 2 mini paintbrush heads that he just slapped on using some glue, but still has some old paint dried onto it, making art his true identity. On to the eyes again. I wanted to give them a slight outline, so I went in with some darker blue. I feel like I tend to hop around a lot while I'm painting, but we're going back to the ears again to fill in the rest. I went in using the same shade that I used before for the face, hands, and feet, but I wanted to make them a little bit lighter, so I added some more white and mixed it in while I was painting it. And it was really difficult to get a good angle for this part, but I decided to paint on some cute toenails, so I did the Roy G. Biv again, did the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Next, coming in again with probably every crafter's worst nightmare, is some glitter. Whoosh! To get this glitter to stick, I'm going to be using some gloss varnish. While I could use glue, I like to use gloss varnish because I feel like it helps keep the shimmer and shine of glitter once it dries. So I started off with the red, and between every color, I would wipe it off as best as I could with the wet paper towel. I would do it this way instead of swishing it around in some water because it's not a biodegradable glitter and I don't want it going down the drains. Typically, I wouldn't get this kind of glitter anymore, but this is something that I've had in my stash for probably over a decade now from something I bought from a craft store. So this way I'm not wasting anything, but if you can find a biodegradable glitter set, I would definitely suggest that. And so for the eyes, I did the light blue up top and the pink on the bottom. And then for cleaning up my board, which is now covered in glitter, I'm going to be using this lint roller. Easy peasy. And now adding some final touches to the face, he needs some blush. I didn't have the exact color that I needed for this again, so I just took some pink and then some red, and I mixed in a little bit of orange as well. And once I got the blush pretty even, I blended out the harsh edges using some light tan color. And then to finish off that big, cute, devilish grin, I'm going to be taking some more purple and lining it underneath the lip. I also couldn't forget to gloss a little over the nose and some over the eyes. And now that we're nearing to the end, I was thinking that I need to name him. What name would be perfect for this chaotic character? One that fits his entire being. He's not just a party-hardy artist, he is party-arty. And now with this guy almost finished, let's get him ready for his photo shoot. And if you guys made it this far in the video, drop a smiley face with the horns emoji in the comment section down below. I'm genuinely so grateful that you took the time out of your day to spend time with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I inspired you to make something today. Time to get crafty, guys. Till next time, bye!